Good morning, everyone. This is our January 6th hard science fiction Zoomers who are artists, writers, and other interested people, readers, the most important readers. We have a very interesting guest today who's coming from the Netherlands. I don't think it's Amsterdam. Where are you coming from, Mike?
Hilversum, close to Amsterdam.
Hilversum, close to Amsterdam. Okay. Well, I'm going to run through our etiquette slides and how to handle the meeting slides. And if you could be admitting people, since I see there's more yet waiting, I will go to our next slide if I can get it to advance, that is. We'll see how this goes. Here we go. We're just using the same etiquette you probably encountered at many other meetings, just asking you to turn off your microphone unless you're speaking. Place your comments in the chat window, unless the speaker says, go ahead and interrupt me. Sometimes they do. And if you want more information on the speaker, you can contact me, or he may give his own contact address. So remember to turn off your microphones. And I have to remember to do something else. What is it? I don't see that control. We have a thing about live captions. We have one member who shows up a lot and she needs the captions. Where is it? Oh, captions. Here we go. Captions settings, show caption. Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to use English.
Bang.
Okay. All right. And now I've got another bunch of X's here. Coster is trying to get admitted again. So just go ahead if he keeps trying. Sometimes it takes him several times. All right. So now we're being recorded. We have our captions. I'm sorry to have to go over this, but good to know that all these things are happening. Make sure we're being recorded. Can you check that we are being recorded from where you are, Mike? You should be able to see a recorded, now recording the red button somewhere.
I can see on the top left of my screen that we are recording.
Okay, good. All right, so I can't, because when I'm doing other things, I can't see that at the moment. All right, so we also have the Tucson Hard Science SF channel at YouTube. And I don't have the link here, but I can paste it into the chat. Another thing that's new with our group is the Planet Zoom Theater Company. And I'm trying to advance to the next slide here. There. Do you want to act, do tech, write a play, be in a play? Contact us at this address for the Planet Zoom Theater Company. And now I think I am done with slides. I will end my share. And I would like to introduce our guest. We're very fortunate to have today Mike, is it Jansen? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Jansen, yes, that's correct. And
I won't say it like the Americans say it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mike Jansen, who is so knowledgeable. I am so thrilled that he could come and be here because he was one of my favorite contributors to this project, which didn't get published, unfortunately, because there's a big barrier to translated collections of stories, apparently. But Mike's story was wonderful. It was an alternate history story called the Hallicarnasus. What was the last part of that title, Mike?
The Hallicarnasus Box.
Oh, the Hallicarnasus Box. And it was about a near future in which the Ottoman Empire had actually ruled Europe in this near future, and how things would be slightly different. So it took tremendous amounts of knowledge of European history and Ottoman history to be able to write that. So that was my foretaste of what Mike is all about, and his fantastic way of using his research to great advantage in his writing. And that's something that I don't see too many writers being able to do, to put it in not only like digested lumps of research, but really make it come alive. So Mike also has won many different awards in Europe. He's an active participant and bringing new people into the Spanish community and as writers. He's been in a number of European conventions as guests. And I guess I don't know all the details of his adventures, but it was given on the invitation sheet that you got, some of his many awards and the things he's participated in. So with that said, I think I'm going to just turn it over to Mike now, and glad to have you, Mike.
Thank you, Gloria. So welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here, first of all. Today, I would like to talk to you about the things we are doing in the Netherlands. As you can see on the first slide, there's a small line that says, in the beginning, God created the Dutch. And of course, the second part of that is the Dutch created all the rest in Holland, because there was no Holland a couple of 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. It was only the half of Holland, and the other parts we had to invent or build or whatever. So it's a bit of mentality that we have in the Netherlands. We like to build stuff, we like to create stuff, and we're trying to be very inventive in these things and innovative. So in my years, I've been writing for about 30 years already, and I've seen the developments that occur within Dutch and Flemish science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. And of course, some of the things that you've been missing out on, because we all want to know what's going on in the world, right? So this is me. Actually, you can see me in the other screen as well. This picture was actually taken in Las Vegas, where I got married to my current wife. So I've been there, and they called me Jansen over there. So when the pastor in Las Vegas told me that we were married, and he introduced us as the Jansens, I'll never forget. Okay, let's see. So first of all, a disclaimer. I'm planning on writing a book on Dutch or the Low Countries, science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and the developments and trends that have been occurring. So I'm also using this presentation as a sort of placeholder. So I've been collecting a lot of material for this. It's about 100 gigabytes right now, and I expect a lot more. So I have some work in store for me, but it should be fun. And I'm probably going to do it with a couple of other authors, which is also something that I've been doing a lot lately, writing with other authors. Because one of the things that I noticed is when you write together, you pick up on each other's problems, and you can improve each other's problems. You can learn from each other. I've been writing for 30 years. I've learned a lot, and still I find new stuff that can improve my own writing. So, okay, let's see. A big agenda. We'll see how far we get. I mean, we have about an hour, maybe less. So let's go to it. As you can see, first of all, a bit about myself, then a couple of other Dutchies, people that you really should know, a couple of Flemish authors, because those are also important. Then we'll get into perspective, history, some other, some professional versus amateur writing and publishing, which is also interesting. Something about the literary prizes in the local country. Something about thank you. So some literary versus genre in the Low Countries.
Mike,
Yes?
The new person, is that someone that we want, or we can get rid of the voice for them?
I thought I knew this person, but
Oh, okay.
not.
But anybody can be, voice muted, so you can also remove them if you don't know them.
Okay. Oh,
I think they're gone again, so that may have been a wandering person.
that may
Okay, I'm sorry, but you have to take this up. They were making noise.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
all right.
One moment. I have this annoying thing in my, in my screen right now. Let me see. How can I do this? I can do it like this. Okay. Good. Who is Dutch and writes genre? So, Mr. Jansen, I have a couple more writers lined up that I'm going to tell you about that should be interesting for you. But first about me. I've been writing since 1991. I had a co-student tell me that there was a contest and he was going to enter and I should enter as well, and we would compete in that contest. I won the prize for Best New Author, and the next year I participated again and won something called the King Kong Award, which was the grand prize for Dutch science fiction, fantasy, and horror. In 1993, I worked with Roelof Goudriaan on creating a publishing firm. We called it Babel Publications, and we created about 30 books from various Dutch authors, mostly because Dutch authors were very underrepresented in the Netherlands at the time. I'll get into why that was later on, but there were reasons for that. In the early 2000s, we took the concept of Babel Publications and transitioned it to a low-key entity that we called Verschijnsel, which is Dutch for apparition, which continued to work, but at a slower pace, because we both had jobs and lots of work, so couldn't produce 4 or 5 books per year anymore. So now it's 2 or 3 books a year. So my first fantasy novel was The Failing God. It came out with Verschijnsel. There are translations of parts 2 and 3 forthcoming. We'll see when we get to that. I'm writing part 4 right now. I've written about 200 stories that have so far been published in 13 languages. About 100 English publications, many with something called JWK Fiction, James Ward Kirk Fiction, which is a small press horror publisher. I like science fiction, I like fantasy, but I also like horror. So, okay, some more about me. I also organize something called the Edge Zero competition. The reason for the name I forget, but I do it with someone called Peter Kaptein, and together we came up with this Edge Zero name, which we thought was kind of cool. The concept is similar to Gardner Does Well. You probably know the best of anthologies, only this is for Dutch stories that have participated in contests or were published in anthologies. So if there is, in 2022, you've written a story, you've published it in an anthology, then in 2023, I want to see it in Edge Zero. I want to see what you have written, and I want to, I have a jury with whom together I select the best stories of the previous year. So I started this in 2016, and so far we've created 6 of these anthologies. As a professional, I am a cybersecurity specialist, and I specialize in ransomware. I've also written and published a book about this ransomware stuff, which is cyber thriller actually. And I will tell more about that later on. I wrote that with Eric Westhovens, who's also a cybersecurity specialist. I live in Hilversum, close to Amsterdam. I have a wife, I have 4 kids, yay. About 5,000 physical books in the house, which is, I think, important to know. And I have tons of ebooks available. If you want to see me do some spoken word, the link is over here. I'll make sure that the presentation link comes to you via Gloria, so that you can look at it whenever you want, if you want. So, what else? Rob Foran, Best New Author, 91, 92 King Kong Award, in 2012, the Literary Prize of the City of Baarn. In 2012, also the Fantastals Award, which is also a contest. The Godin Science Fiction and Fantasy Award in 2020, and something called the Mossy Statue. If you look at the bottom picture over there, where I am in green, I have this statue in my hand, which weighs about 15 kilograms because it's a big block of stone. And there's a long history about that thing. It's given to people for achievements. So basically for your stories, for the things you've done to promote science fiction and fantasy, all of these things together give you the Mossy Statue Achievement Award. And it's it's a 15-kilogram statue. That's these awards these days. I mean, so I've won a couple of these. Kind of fun. So some of my recent publications, I'm not keeping track of all of them anymore. It's beginning to become too much, actually. Of course, sometimes I'll just go through the motions and get everything back. From left to right, you can see Failing God, The Worlds of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, Lovecraft in Holland, which is a recent hardcover that I published through a Swedish publisher. The green book in the middle is the second part of the Failing God. We have the Indiana Horror Review. There is a Swedish magazine called Contrast Magazine where I was published. Edge Zero, the most recent one, something called the Bloedzuigers in the Polder, which is basically bloodsuckers in Holland. It's an anthology about vampires and parasites. Also kind of fun. Wonderwaan and Ransomware, of course, there's the book again. And something called The Bar with a Thousand Doors. Concept anthologies. And if you look on Amazon and you look for me, you'll find these books and about 100 more. There's a lot of them. So, but that's all about me. How about some other Dutchies? Thomas Oldeheuvelt. Has anyone ever heard of this guy? Well, funny thing, Stephen King has. So if there's any Stephen King fans over here, he has at some point mentioned Hex, which is at the bottom or at the top right of the book. He has mentioned it as one of the most scary books that he ever read, which is great. I mean, for a Dutch guy to get such a to get a review like that, that's great. He's also a Hugo Award winner. So Thomas Oldeheuvelt is someone to look out for. If you read his stories, they're very well crafted, very professional, and there is a reason that he's really, really successful right now. Let's see. Then we have someone that you probably do not know. His full name is Thijs van Ebbenhorst Stengbergen. So in Dutch, that's also a mouthful, but for that reason, he has shortened it to Thijs Steng. So this guy is a machine. He's 68 or 69 years old, and he has written over 100 books and over 1,000 stories, many of which were in English. He has won many prizes. He provides sculptures, art, creative things to the Dutch science fiction. So whenever you are in Holland and you see some science fiction stuff, big chance that Thijs Steng is involved in some manner or form. And as you will see, many of the Dutch publishers use his artwork for their books. I do the same thing, and he loves doing it. So we help each other because I publish his stories, of course. So that's fun. Then we have Jaap Boekenstein, who has written about 12 novels and more than 400 stories, many in English. We have Sophia Drent, who has written half a dozen novels and more than 50 stories, some in English. She's our own Anne Rice. So if you look at the book called Bloedwetten, Blood Laws, it's the first part of a quadrilogy, and these books are great. So if there are any US publishers here, Sophia Drent is worth translating. This is a great author. Okay. Then we have Bo Balder. She's also a prize-winning author. She regularly publishes in Clark's World and others. She has written a few novels and some 30+ stories, but she only publishes professionally. So if you read Clark's World, you have read her before because she's just very good. Floris Kleine, very similar to Bob Walder in approach. So he's the Writers of the Future winner of 2005 and also some 30 plus stories, a couple of pro-published novels, and he's also, you can find him in many locations. So if you go to Clark's World or Dreamforge, you can find his stuff. So who else do we have? The Belgian guys. I'm mentioning Eddie Bertin and Frank Roger. There are others, but these guys are prolific. Eddie Bertin is unfortunately no longer with us. He died a couple of years ago, but he was groundbreaking in the sense that he created the science fiction fan clubs in Belgium during the 60s and 70s. And he has been published in dozens of English publications, mostly to do with mythological horror and okay, sorry, I just had to look at something. So he has done a lot of Lovecraftian stories and a lot of science fiction stories. Also, I've published him a number of times in horror anthologies on Babel Publications and Het Verschijnsel, because he's continuously producing. He was continuously producing work, but not as much as Frank Roger. Frank Roger de Kuiper is his full name, and Frank Roger is his pen name, and he is crazy prolific. He has written well over 1,500 stories. He has been translated into 45 languages. I sometimes joke with him that at some point I will catch up to him, and he's always like, "Yeah, sure, just send out more stories. You'll get there sometime." So he's a fun guy. Let's see. Next. Okay, a bit of perspective about Dutch-speaking countries. We are the 40th most spoken language in the world. 40th. That's actually not a whole lot compared to English and Chinese and Indian. We're nothing. I mean, let's face it, we have about 17 million people with 1 million non-native speakers. There's about 10.5 million Belgians and 5 million thereabouts are Flemish. So we're looking at some 22 million people who speak Dutch. Of course, South Africa, Suriname, Indonesia, USA, there are about 1 million Dutch-speaking people there, but their Dutch is somewhat ancient or archaic, which is okay. I mean, it works. For comparison, 500 million native English speakers, and English is the second language for well over 1 billion people, maybe more. So we reach about 60 million Dutch speakers with Dutch as the first or second language. So from that perspective, there are a lot fewer readers and writers of science fiction and fantasy, obviously. So the people that you've just seen here, the authors, they are basically the top of their field in the Netherlands. Okay, and a bit of history. Where did we start with science fiction and fantasy in the Netherlands? So we actually only started in the 60s. Before the 60s, we had 2 world wars. We had lots of stuff going on, but not a whole lot of science fiction or fantasy or that sort of stuff. Of course, there were some books or some stories like Willem Bilderdijk's Special Trip Through the Air, which is from 1813, so well before Jules Verne. And I know of a couple of stories from the 16th and 17th century, which were utopian or dystopian. So basically descriptions of the future of Holland. So interesting. Something that I will probably put in the book that I'm writing. So up to the 60s, you had the golden age in the US. And that golden age never occurred to us. It never happened. So what did happen was that we, in the 60s, we received a guest, someone called Forrest J. Ackerman. And he was described as a super fan. And that super fan visited the Netherlands, and there were several fans over here who wanted to meet with this guy. And he created enthusiasm for the genre, for science fiction, fantasy, horror, all of these things. And what happened was that because of his visit, we had a number of societies form. So we had a science fiction society, which was called NCSF. So this is the Dutch Science Fiction Society. We had something called Perry Roden, which was quite a big thing in those days. And what happened was there was a society formed, which was called the Perry Roden Science Fiction Terra organization. We had a Tolkien organization formed, which was called Lembas, after the elven waybread. And we had something for Star Trek fans as well, which was called the Flying Dutch. Very nice. And what you can see is that during the 70s and 80s, there was a bandwagon going on. Everyone wanted to do science fiction and fantasy. And what you saw was the Dutch publishers were translating Golden Age authors, also some of the newer authors, but also some Dutch authors. So we're talking about Felix Thijssen, that you never heard of, but that's okay. He writes thrillers these days, but he's still there. He wrote a couple of very good science fiction books. We had Wim Gijssen, who unfortunately is dead right now, but he wrote a couple of great science fiction and fantasy novels, which were never translated. That's too bad, because they were really great books. Peter Schaap, Mr. Wim Stolk, or Wim Marison, as he was called as his pen name. These guys were basically creating a market. Unfortunately, at the end of the 80s, we reached sort of a peak in participation in conventions, participation in societies. What you saw was that the entire the peak culminated in the Worldcon in 1990 in The Hague. There was a lot of interest. There was a lot of people were going there. There were more than 10,000 people gathering in The Hague for this World Convention, and that was great. That was fun. And then after that, all of the enthusiasm and all of the spunk basically left for some reason. And I'm still trying to find out what the exact causes were, but it could be a combination of economy, maybe some other stuff going on, maybe sort of a sort of tiredness in the people. They've put in a lot of work, but they don't see the results coming in. We also saw a number of magazines which folded around that time. So yeah, 70s, 80s, large growth. We had the societies that were founded in the 70s were actually growing to several thousand participants during the 80s. And then going into the 90s, that dwindled to a couple of hundred. So you saw this change occurring. So there was a downturn. There were consolidations. We had some genre authors dying, and one of them, Paul Harland, was actually murdered because, well, you need some excitement in your life, of course. That was in 2003. And what we saw then was the rise of the internet, which caused a lot of interesting effects on the market. And then from 2010 and onward, we saw the rise of ebooks and pod. So basically publishing and printing on demand, and a proliferation of small press and the emergence of a new generation of Dutch genre writers. What I've seen, I'll share some stuff about that later, was that as computers became more prevalent, as the internet became available as this huge library with all kinds of information and stuff that was helping people to write interesting stories. When that happened, you also saw the number of publications go up. I'll show you a picture of that later. It's kind of fun to see that. I also do some stuff with statistics, and I like this kind of stuff. So this is what I mean with the rise of internet, pod, alternative media, and of course things like text programs. So if you have Word or WordPerfect or whatever, if you're using that, it's easier to write. It's easier to combine your stuff together. And these are official numbers from the Netherlands. If you look at this, you'll see that around 1500 or 1600, we published maybe 10, 20 books a year, maybe 30, maybe 40. Then as we went into the golden age, the Dutch golden age was 16 to 1700, you saw that the number of books was also increasing. And there was a dip around 1812 when the Batavian Republic was ended because Napoleon came in. Then a steady rise going into the World War, World War II. World War I, we were neutral. World War II, we were occupied by the Germans. And you saw that the number of publications dwindled to well below 500. And then end of the 20th century, 1990 and on, you saw the rise of the internet and the possibilities of alternative media, publish on demand, ebooks. And you saw this rise in the first years of the 21st century. And this rise was exponential. It was crazy. As you can see, going into 2,000-3,000 publications per year. And then in 2008, 2009, there was this crisis. We had this subprime crisis. And you saw that the number of, so as the economy flourished and the technological means became more easy to use and allowed you to reach a wider audience and create on demand the stuff that you needed, you also saw the number of publications increase dramatically. And as the economy turned down, the number of publications also dwindled. So there is an economic aspect to that. Okay, with the rise of internet, before we had that, we had something called gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is what the professional publishing houses are doing. We have in the US and also in the Netherlands, there are a limited number of professional publishers, and they have a gatekeeping effect. So the number of publications that they can put out is limited. I mean, a publisher can do 20, 30, 40 titles per year. They put in marketing, they put in the redaction, the editing, the artwork, all the stuff that you need. They pay an advance to the author. You hope. Sometimes you don't. Okay. But they are gatekeepers, and because of the rise of internet and publish on demand, print on demand, and the possibilities that people are getting to publish for themselves, you also see something happening, which is the quality of books that are appearing on the market. It's great if you publish a lot of stuff, but if it's all crap, like Vonnegut said, 90% of everything is crap. And we saw that on the internet as well. We saw that happening. And this is not just the Netherlands. I mean, the Netherlands is very densely populated. It's also very densely connected. I'm working on a gigabit Ethernet over here, but that's common over here.
Mike, I don't mean to interrupt, but there is a new person. And do you see that name? Do you want to admit that person?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not going to name that name today.
Okay.
No. So what did that do? Well, we saw a lot more material, which is good, because if there is more material, you can read more. There's more. More is good. Unfortunately, 90% is crap. And I'm not saying that to be negative to people, but I read about, I don't know, 400 or 500 stories every year from many authors in the Netherlands. and 90% is serious crap. And you try to help people, and you try to, I mean, the reason that I create these anthologies is to show people, authors specifically, what are the kind of stories that people want to read. I have this jury, it's 10 people. I have readers, I have authors, I have publishers. They together decide, like gatekeepers, what is valuable for people. What do people want to read? And that works. Unfortunately, not everyone wants to learn. I mean, it's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, you know? That's the kind of stuff that you have to contend with. So what we have seen is that as we move into this model of self-publishing or publishing on demand, you see a number of amateur publishers rise. They start out as amateurs, they become semi-pro, and then at some point they become professionals. Most of them remain amateur because it's mostly something that you do besides your actual job, but some of them actually go towards a pro model. And then there are scammers. Yes, we have scammers as well. We all know things like vanity press. We have that in the Netherlands as well. We may be Dutch, but we have all the characteristics of actual human beings. So yeah, we have scammers as well. The good thing is a number of the publishers are actually creating models that work for them, but also for the authors. Things like skin in the game publishers, Zilverspoor, Gordijn Publishing. They want you to invest in their company, which you do. You get a pile of books. It may sound like vanity publishing, but they help you with marketing, with editing, with all the things that you need to do. And they try to professionalize and make sure that you actually want to go out and promote that book for them, not just you, but they also want you to appear at presentations, at specific book events in bookstores. These are the things. It's like a participation model that they want you to agree to. I have an opinion about that. I work according to Yock's law, which is money should flow to the authors, and this is something that I do not agree on with things like Zilverspoor and Gordijn Publishing. They ask authors to pay up, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. If the author really wants to, they will help. And if they do not really want to, then maybe you shouldn't go into business with each other. But that's me. Okay, something about literary prizes in the Low Countries. You'll find that most of the literary prizes actually occur in the Netherlands, not specifically in Belgium. The number of Belgian prizes is rather limited. I don't know why that is, but it may have to do with the Belgian people being less organized than the Dutch people. I don't know. From the 70s, we had a Benelux Award, a King Kong Award, that became the Millennium Prize. The Millennium Prize became the Paul Harland Prize. This was in 2003 when Paul Harland was murdered. So as an honorary title, the Millennium Prize was becoming the Paul Harland Prize. In 2005, there was something called Pure Fantasy, which as an award started, it also was a magazine. In 2009, we had Fantastos start. In 2009, the city of Brugge, which was a Belgian convention or a Belgian contest, which had a lot of participation. 250, 300 stories were sent in, which is a lot of stories. Then in 2011, Pure Fantasy stopped because it was becoming too expensive. But we also had the start of Trek Saga, which was a continuous improvement story thing. Then the Paul Harland Prize became the Harland Awards. Sure, the City of Brugge award ceased. Then in 2016, very important, Edge Zero started. That's the moment that I started with the anthology stuff. Gloria, do you know a Gabe Itch? In 2017, Fantastos ended, Trek Saga ended in 2017, but we also had the start of Gordijn, and in 2019 something called Waterloper, Water Walker, as a follow-up to Fantastos. So as you can see, there are a number of prizes being organized every year, and what I see happening is that with the rise of internet and text programs and the research facilities that you have on the internet, all that combined together gives a rise in the number of stories that people write. So what does that look like? At the top of the screen, you see prize participation, number of entrants, and the Dutch part says all the contests together. So from 2000 to 2020, we're looking at quite a growth, going from maybe 30, 40 stories per year to almost 700 stories in 2011. And currently, on average, you'll find that some 300 to 400 stories per year are produced by writers in the Netherlands and Belgium, which is kind of interesting because 10% is good. And if 10% is good, that means that we have some 30 to 40 stories which are very good and which should be shown to public. People need to read those stories. Some of them are frivolous, some of them are golden agey. Sure, sword and sorcery is always fun, but there are also stories in there which are interesting from a societal point of view, from a social commentary point of view, and these need to come out there, not just in the Netherlands. They also need to go international. And this is something that I'm working on to make sure that these people get information, that they get help, that they get translation, and that they get shown where they can place their stories, because these stories should be read. And I'm sure that in many countries in the world, we'll find the same thing. Swedish, German, Greek authors, Italian authors, many of them are already being translated because they translate themselves. But from an international podium perspective, they're not getting the traction that they need, or the traction that they would find interesting. Also, people are missing out on the stories they have to tell, which are often very, very different from what the American public in general likes to read or reads. Different cultures and different views, different opinions give different stories. And these different stories at this point in time are often not heard. There are many initiatives on the internet, by the way, from various publishers to incorporate things like African culture or South American culture into stories that people can read, so that they can learn about the world that they live in. So, okay. Participation in the various prizes that we have. As you can see, this the colors show the various prizes that there are and the number of stories that they get. Most of these stories go to specific prizes, things like Fantastos and the Harland Awards. That's the top one. Those are the largest contributors to much of what is going on. And you'll find that every year, for instance, the Harland Awards get about 200 entrants. You see Waterloper getting 50 or 60. You see Edge Zero getting approximately 100 to 150 every year. I would love to have 300 stories every year, but for some reason, authors find it difficult to send in their stories. I've wondered about that because it's free. You have a chance to get your story published, and I want these stories out there, because one of the things that I find most perplexing and I find annoying actually is you write a story, you and you enter a contest, you end up, I don't know, in the top 20 somewhere out of a field of 200 or 300 authors. So that's a story that could potentially be interesting for the people out there. So why aren't you sending it in? Because if it's so good, then people should be able to read it. But they're not doing it. And I've been breaking my head about why that is. And in some cases, it's because people forget. There is a deadline, so yeah, sure, it can happen. In some cases, people are have ended up at the somewhere in the top 20, but they have this failure anxiety. They are scared to that they will fail for some reason, which is recognizable. When I won the King Kong Award, which was the big prize in 1992, my first thought was, how the hell am I going to improve on this? How can I write something that is better than what I've written before? And it took me some time to get over that. And I think many people, many authors have that same problem. They end up high in a contest somewhere. Where are they going to go now? That's difficult for them. Okay. What does it all mean? Well, funny thing. We have about 500 Dutch writers, give or take, ranging from people between 10 and 20 to people over the oldest writer that I know is 89 years old. Who's a Belgian guy, by the way, writes pretty good stuff, but he's 89. So on the one hand, you want him to write as much as he can, so while he still can. On the other hand, he could just drop dead tomorrow. I mean, that's the reality of life. So we have this saying in the Netherlands: there's 1 million Dutch people that are writing a book. It's like a status symbol. However, actual publications from those people, not a whole lot. Still, about 20,000 Dutch books are published every year. And these are not just science fiction books, of course, because that's rather a limited subset. But what we see is that we have novels, romance novels, educational books, blah, 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 whatever. All these kinds of books. It's about 20,000 different books in Dutch every year. Most of them are translations, by the way. So the number of actual Dutch books coming out is not that high. It's maybe 1,000 or 1,500, and the rest is all English or other language translated. Now, I've been doing this for about 30 years. There's about 500 Dutch active writers, and about 100 of those are actually publishing the stories. 400 of them just put the stories in the drawer and never look at it anymore. I'm like, that's so bad. That's so, we're missing out on stuff. It's not just the English are missing out on the Dutch stuff. The Dutch are missing out on the Dutch stuff. So we have about 50 people publishing internationally and less than 10 at pro level. The people that I showed at the beginning of the slide deck are the people that work at pro level. This is it. These are the people that show Dutch writing on the international podium. It's not more than that. And I'm trying to get more people to translate their stuff, trying to get them to publish more and send into to different magazines and publishers. But it's a long journey to get there. Fortunately, the new generation is much more English oriented, and they should be making waves, and I'll be there to guide them and help them in finding the right path and finding the right venues to show their stuff and to show what they can do and what they're worth. I'm going to see how they end up. I'm going to see where I can help them, how I can help them develop. What I'm currently doing is writing with these authors and writers to make sure that We learn from each other, like I said in the beginning. If you write together, you learn from each other. I learn from them, but they also learn a lot from me. And it helps to create new, beautiful stories that people want to read. Now, another discussion. Not sure if we have all the time for it, but as long as we're here, there is a discussion in the Low Countries about literary versus genre. This is something that you've probably heard in the US as well. We have a pretty big literary community. It's sizable. There's dozens of literary magazines, and there's a lot of literature being written and published. The best of those works often border the fantastic. I find that interesting because genre is viewed by the literary people as childish. They come out and they say it, what you write is childish. And I'm like, really? I think you're boring and old-fashioned. So you get into this discussion about what is good, what is not good. And you have to see this in the light of something called the Second World War trauma. The Netherlands have seen famine and war and hunger. Well, famine and hunger is the same, but pestilence. Basically, we've seen a couple of the Riders of the Apocalypse for 5 years, and people have been traumatized, and that trauma has worked through the generations. So you see that the many of the books that are written are still about the war, which was 70, 80 years ago. They're still writing about it, and I'm like, get over it, guys. There's more out there to write about. It's not just 70, 80 years ago. There's stuff going on now that we need to reflect on. But hey, this is what people want to write. It's what they can do. There are some initiatives to let literary writers write genre and vice versa, because genre writers can very well write literary stuff, maybe as it borders on magic realism or as it borders on the real world. You can still put in fantastic elements.
I have a question. We have a Brandon Moreno wanting to enter. For those who are interested, why we're getting so many people that we don't know, it was put on Twitter, so we're getting a few that we're not sure. What about Brandon? Should we let Brandon in?
Brandon sounds like a regular name. It's better than the guy.
All right. Okay.
I'm not going to mention. So I find it interesting that we are trying to let these writers do something that they're not used to. So it's hit and miss, because at some point the discussion is the quality of the work. The literary people think that their work is very, very high quality. And this is an interesting thing because we're talking about genre, and genre is still the literature of ideas. Whereas literature is more about character, deeper meaning and development. And combining those two is kind of difficult sometimes. So why would you discuss that with each other? Why would you try to do something that you're not good at? What I much rather see is that literary and genre people both look at stories and tell each other what they see in those stories. So not just do deeper analysis of what an idea story, a genre story, is doing versus a literary story. Why are they different? Why are they the same? What's going on? So see, I've been developing an initiative to clarify writings. And the clarification comes in explaining together with a reader as a writer, what's going on with this story? Why is this story? Why do you find it interesting? Why do you read the story? And what is your takeaway of the story? In the beginning, all the way in the beginning, Gloria mentioned a story that I wrote about with a lot of research in it, with an Ottoman Empire and blah, 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 blah. That's great. There is a lot of research in that story. So I've recently written a story called The Source. In Dutch it's called De Bron. So what that story is telling us is, where do ideas come from? Literally, where do ideas come from? If I look at a book, whatever book it is, call it the Bible or whatever you want, where do the ideas come from?
Boo!
Okay. Thanks, Ellie. Okay, so what I was trying to do, I was working with Deborah van Duin to create a deep analysis of this story. And what happened was that she could ask questions and I gave answers, and I also gave hints on what to look for in the story. There's a lot of research in that story, and in a nutshell, Guy finds a manuscript which is very old and dates back to something called the Porn Pope, who lived around 900. And what he was doing, he was creating the papal institution was completely corrupted by this guy. So from a historical point of view, something interesting is going on there. So the main character finds this manuscript, reads it, sees what's going on, and says, hey, this is interesting. What is this manuscript pointing at? And before he knows it, he's on a trip to Italy, trying to find the rest of all the manuscripts that this Pope actually hid in his basement. That's interesting. And after that, he goes on a trip to Antarctica for some reason. So, and there he finds what amounts to the Library of Alexandria in a pyramid on the South Pole. And all of this stuff together, all these elements together, are meaningful. They have meaning, and all the research is correct. What I'm doing is I'm adding the fantastic elements, I'm adding some layering, I'm adding specifics for the character, for the main character. There are some specifics around that character, and all of that together, combined with literary tricks, English constructions, Dutch constructions, all of this stuff together shows you how this story is constructed, how it works, what it means. And we took 4 or 5 sessions together to completely go through this story. It's a big story, so that's okay. And the funny thing is, after that, she looked at the story completely differently. Why? Because she started to see and started to ask questions about basically her own reality, which was the intention of the story. The intention of the story was to question, or to make the reader question reality. That was the intention of the story. And maybe this is a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but unless you look at the story and understand what the author is trying to do, you're not going to understand it. You can read the story and say, hey, this is entertaining stuff. This is good. I like it. I've seen some stuff that I find interesting. The historical stuff is interesting. Sure, it's a good story. That means I haven't done my work right. In many cases, the people that I've spoken to about the story, they tell me that they find the story somewhat unsettling. That's good. I like that. Because if it's unsettling, that means that you are thinking about it. And if you are thinking about it, that means that I've done my job right. Do you see everything? No, you probably won't. Why? Because of the way that I've written the story. It's full of misdirection. It's full of complications. It's full of factoids that may be meaningful to the story or not. So basically the entire construction, it's a weird way of writing also. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm putting in so much information it's such a dense and compact story that it makes people, like I said, it makes people question reality. It makes people question the basically, when you look at reality, the way, if you look at the screen right now, you see the input from your sensors. That's what you see. So we have things like augmented reality, where you can change the input from your sensors. Now, if you go even one step further and you directly tell your brain that your screen is round instead of square, then your screen is round, because that's what your brain is telling you, that the screen is round. Well, that's interesting, because that means that the truth that you are presented with may be different than the truth that is really the truth. So this is something that we've been doing this analysis on. And for the person that I was working with, it was an eye-opener on how this kind of story is constructed, what it does and what it means. And what that means is that it shows that some readers have the capability to look deeper into this kind of story. And this is something that I'm going to explore further, for the simple reason that if more people start reading like this, I mean, not all the writers that I know will write stories like this, but for the stories that are written like this, we also need readers that understand what these stories are. The same way that literary readers read literature. So this is something that I'm working on, and it's going to develop, but that's maybe for another time. Let's see. As a success story, this is the final thing that we do today. I wrote a cyber thriller. I started in February of last year, and I finished it at the end of March. It's about 41,000 words, so it's not really big. It's 200 pages, and I'm a cybersecurity specialist. I talk about ransomware to my customers because I know how the ransomware gangs work. I've worked with these gangs, and they're not nice guys, by the way, but I can write a thriller about it. Why do I write a cyber thriller about it? Also looking back at the previous discussion, you have to know what your audience is. So in my case, the audience is C-level. And with C-level, I mean CEO, CFO, CTO, CISO. These are the people that I need to reach. They're not really technical. They're not really, they may be very specialist in their own way, but they are the boss of their division or whatever. So what I did, I wrote a thriller with mostly narrative and some technical info, very light. It's fiction, but with extras. So from a business perspective, we all want to write stories and read stories, especially the writers want to write stories that sell. Because if you sell something, then there is value to your story. So what this book contains is 100% correct information. We know how ransomware works. We know what happens with it. We sold about 2,000 copies in 8 months, which for the Netherlands, for a basically niche market product, because cybersecurity is, although it's hot, it's not something that the average Joe is concerned with, because it's pretty abstract stuff. But we sold 2,000 copies, and very interesting, companies like personalized editions. So if you look at 13 ransomware on Amazon, you'll find, I think, a dozen different versions, because you can abuse Amazon KDP, the Kindle publishing stuff, to create these editions. And they like it. So they order hundreds of copies at the same time, which is good. And I'm working on the follow-up to that, which is another book about ransomware and security, and also as a cyber thriller, because we have this audience, the C-level audience. where we are going to introduce them into even more ransomware and criminal activity by hackers and that sort of stuff. So with that, the only thing that remains is a list of reference material, which you will have if you download this presentation from the link that I'm going to send to Gloria. And with that, I give it back to Gloria.
I guess that was the end, eh? Well, thank you so much. That was very informative and engaging, and gives us so much to think about because we're all at ground zero here in the US. Everything, do you know Christian Thomas?
Yes.
You know him. He said, we're the neutron star. The US is the neutron star. We draw everything in, and even the Europeans can't get to know each other except when they get translated into English because of the language issues. So he says it's like he used the metaphor of a neutron star. That's the US. And unfortunately, I see a lot of complacency that we didn't used to have, just to fill you in, because I grew up in the 60s and 70s when there was a huge interest in, in overseas, global, not much global, but more European, East and West in those days, science fiction. People were buying those. They were very interested in what other people are writing. And unfortunately now it seems like they feel we have enough talent here. We need our own venue. We need to hog all the slots. I mean, that may be putting it a bit too bluntly, but that's what I'm getting from, you know, I go to conventions. They don't mention anything outside of the US. It's as if no one else, except for the Worldcon, they can't get away with that.
Yeah, that's true. What you will see is that we talked about gatekeepers, and the number of gatekeepers in the US has dwindled. There are very few gatekeepers left. So the amount of books that or stories that the gatekeepers can publish is limited. And they have a very specific business model. The business model says they need to make money, lots of it. So what you will find is that they will publish what they think is an immediate hit. Something that is popular, something that will resonate, something that's easy on the marketing. That sort of story, that sort of book, that's something that will sell. What does that mean? You get lots of stuff that is similar, the same. There was this question about the Romance literature situation like in the Netherlands. I think it's very similar to the United States. It's mostly translated stuff because there is lots of translation going on. But there is a specific market for it, and a lot of the novels sold in the Netherlands are romance. It's romance literature. Why is that? Well, people want to read that. That's easy. And the same goes for the US. Romance literature will sell. Funny enough, you'll find romance literature usually pretty close to the science fiction and fantasy, basically fantasy literature. The covers look the same. They have the same coloring. They have much of the same themes in it. This is something that I've observed. You mentioned this. Dan Simmons mentioned it to me 30 years ago. He visited a convention in the Netherlands. We talked about the American Book Center in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And he said, have you ever looked at the fantasy section? I said, yeah, sure. He said, what is it next to? The romance literature. What is the difference? Not much. He said, well, there you go. So romance literature and fantasy are often pretty close to each other. And I don't know, it's maybe some kind of escapism, something. Yeah, you're out of the world for some time, and whether it's pure romance or it's romance with unicorns, I don't know. But yeah, this means that the same audience probably likes these books. So,
I would like to say a word, if you don't mind, at this point, because there's a scholar named Franco Moretti who
Yes.
uses computer assist. Are you familiar with Franco Moretti?
I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah, he uses computer corpus work, and he analyzes who are the target audiences. And when you say fantasy overlaps so much with romance, uses similar colors, there are male appealing colors, there are female appealing colors. And
Correct.
if you look at some of the military sci-fi, it's a whole different palette.
Correct.
So I think that what my husband calls relationship dramas covers both of those.
Mhm.
And also the hyper capital franchising of a character or something where you get endless series of this. It hit good once, and now we have to do it for the rest of our career. It's like
Yeah.
typecasting in film.
I can reference Robert Jordan here. I can reference Laurel K. Hamilton here. I don't know if you know Laurel K. Hamilton's vampire hunter stuff, who has written so far, I think, 30 books about the same character. So, and this is not unique.
No, and we have Harry Potter, you know, not
Yeah.
30, that never went to 30, but
No,
it's,
the spin-offs are becoming sort of, you know, there's
I
a lot.
think it's a different mentality, because I never liked series. I never did, and I'm an older generation reader. I can get into it maybe for one or two, but I don't want to sit and read one after another of the same character. Maybe the exception is Sherlock Holmes, but this seems to be the case where people don't want to have to go into a whole new world each time. They want everything set up except one little new thing.
Yeah, it's also, it's how do you say? It's easy. If
Mhm.
you, it's both for the writer and for the reader. The reader can easily get into the character because this is the character that they know, but the same goes for the writer. They write about the character that they've already developed everything for. All they need to do is add plot and add elements, and they have a new story, and they have a fixed audience that will buy anyway. So yeah, I can understand the appeal there. That's
I mean, there is an appeal, and I shouldn't dismiss them. I just don't care for this most of the time. But I'm sure that there are better writers and lesser writers doing some of these may be brilliant because the writer doing the series is at a higher level of complexity or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not something that encourages innovation in a field. It really doesn't. And people need to think about that, whatever country you're in.
Yeah. Well, as an example, one of my favorite authors who unfortunately died 7 or 8 years ago is Ian Banks with his culture novels.
Mhm.
Yes, they are a series, and yes, the culture novels are similar in many ways, but the way this guy wrote his books, I mean, I'm still impressed whenever I read it, because I recognize some of the layering that he's doing. I recognize some of the research that has gone into the book. And what I find is that although it's a series, although I understand certain elements will be the same because it's the culture, the way he writes the story and the way he presents his information, I mean, I'm blown away by it every time. And as for fantasy, I mean, this was hardcore science fiction. As for fantasy, I'm a Glenn Cook fan. Black Company and Dread Empire, these are books that I can read again and again because they are, I don't know, Glenn Cook can set his characters in such a way that you sympathize with them within 5 words. I mean, he has this gift for that. So, recommendation: read some Glenn Cook. If you like something called grimdark, it's a grimdark fantasy. So
those are very good recommendations, and I hope people will look into it. I was just thinking before people go off to other things, are there any other questions, any other thoughts about international writing versus our hermetically sealed American consciousness of the world? That's what I see that's different.
Before you run off, I want to say thank you so much, Mike. And we'll be looking up those things. And
Really?
now on I'll see you later, but head on to that discussion.
Okie dokie. Will do.
Okay. So any of you, there's not that many of us, but do any of the few of you who are here have a question or a comment? You don't have to have a question, just something you want to say. Because I think this is very difficult territory. We're moving into a unipolar world where the US feels that it can take up the whole stage. You know, it's very worrisome for some of our friends in other places.
It's an
Having
interesting
had this talk before, you know, with Christian Thomas.
Yeah, like I said, it's an interesting development going on in the world, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a unipolar world. It could become a multipolar world still, but it's not going to be easy, and I foresee some pain in our futures because of that. On a lighter note, Roelof Goudriaan, I see you know him.
Oh yes, I know Roelof. He
Yeah.
was a good friend. I think I met him through a writers group that was one of the early in DOS era online groups.
Probably, yes. He's married to Lynn Ann Morse.
Lynn Ann. I couldn't
Yeah.
cough up the name.
Yeah. He lives in Belgium these days.
Oh, well, yeah, they were living in Ireland when I last was.
Yeah, that was 13 years ago.
So you see how long it's been. Anyway, yeah, give him our best.
Will do.
So Karen Zimmerman has, we didn't do introductions like we usually do, but there were some glitches in our opening. We have a new person who's joined our group. Karen, are you there?
I am.
Karen, have you ever attended any of these science fiction things?
No, no, Gloria hooked me up when I asked her some questions. I teach some science fiction in public schools as I can. And I'm very interested for decades.
Well, you missed most of the presentation, but it is going to go up on YouTube. And I will put up the,
Oh, good.
I can't open my other screen and I'm afraid to knock myself out of this one, but
Right.
It's called the Tucson Hard Science with a hyphen, Science Fiction Zoom, no, Science Fiction Channel, Tucson Hard Science Fiction Channel. And Mike's presentation will be put up there as the YouTube video as of tomorrow. So you'll see the whole thing.
Okay.
I don't know how all my other windows went away, but I'm afraid to try to reopen Firefox because you never know. Then it might decide it doesn't like this window or something, and then I'm knocked out. So otherwise, I would put into the chat the direct link to our.
I can find YouTube.
Yeah, just go to YouTube and put in Tucson Hard Science with a hyphen Science Fiction Channel. And that exact name should pull it up. It does on my computer.
Okay.
And are you on our distribution list?
I sure am.
Okay, so Karen, it's always there. Every announcement I put out has the link to it, so.
Great.
And
right.
I apologize to, let's see, Nancy, are you here? Nancy?
I don't think so.
Nancy was here. Let me see who's still with us. Okay, it looks like Nancy took off. Okay, so Carrie Myers, you're still here. Carrie. Maybe Carrie.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, Carrie, do you want to just say a few words about your interest in the group? And, you know, we didn't have a chance to do that.
Well, yeah, I'm getting more interested in writing. I'm a science fiction reader for sure. And I was just going through my books because we're trying to get rid of some of our stuff. And I have a lot of really good, like Stanislaw Lem and I don't know, even just other science fiction that I really love. So I'm also a physics teacher, a retired physics teacher, right now retired. So anyway, I am getting more interested in writing. I met someone yesterday who writes mysteries and she made it sound so interesting. So I don't know, I just really like the group. I'm guess on the shy side, I don't contribute that much, but your talk was really interesting. So thanks very much.
Most welcome.
And you know what, Carrie, you can do both. You can write a science fiction mystery because Isaac Asimov wrote a series called The Black Widowers.
Oh, yeah.
It was a series. And again, you know, my complaints about series. But, you know, I read one or two. And as I say, I didn't keep up with all of them. But that is a definite case of a regular science fiction writer doing mystery. So, you know, you don't have to, it's not either or.
Yeah, and it's good to write together because, like I said,
Is it?
You learn from each other. Putting the words on paper is one thing. Putting them in the right order on paper is a second thing. That's a bit more difficult. But if you have someone who is already very capable in that, and you try for yourself what you can do, then this person can give you advice on structuring the story, structuring the research, and finding out. I mean, you're a physics teacher, you know how the world should work.
Right.
Not sure that the world always works the way we want it, but okay. But from a science fiction perspective, that's a good thing because you're not going to bullshit your readers. But
how about Hussein? Shall we admit Hussein?
Sorry?
There's a new person trying to get in. Hussein, can you see him? Hussein?
Yeah, never heard of him.
Okay, well then I'm not going to let him.
Yeah,
because
we're almost done.
We had, yeah, it went out on Twitter, and we're getting some people that saw it on Twitter. One thing that I wanted to also say is that you can be a mentor figure for other writers as well, because people assume they cannot write science fiction. They have to write fantasy or something because they're not a PhD physicist. But I've been saying this for years. We have so many astronomers here in Tucson and physicists. And often if it's, you know, a question about your plot, they don't mind it. They will help you with your plot.
Yep.
So, you know, acting as a mentor, you might get someone who already has a story going, and then as you help them, it may be more like a collaboration by the end. Does that make sense, Carrie?
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes you think you're doing something good for someone, but it ends up benefiting you at least as much as it does them.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Are you Jim Doty? He's a prolific writer. He sounds to me like someone who's eager to help others. You know, Jim, he comes to some of our meetings.
Do you have a writers group, Gloria?
This is it. So, but I think what we could build in, what do you think of this, Mike? We could build in sort of a call, like at the end of the meeting, who needs a collaborator? This is your chance. It's collaboration moment now.
Yeah, that's quite possible. I mean, it's.
And then we could put something in, like a link in our chat, because he keeps coming back. Okay, go on again. Because if we put it in chat or speak it out loud, then even if they only watch it in the film version, we actually get many more views in the, I'd say 5 to 8 times more views, or even 10 times more views when we put it up as a video. So don't be judging by how many are actually here. It's just these people can interact with you.
Yeah. And well, it's like what I do in the Netherlands. I do this competition, this Edge Zero, and I see the stories that are coming in. And some of them are really cringe. I'm like, okay, this is not good. But in some cases, the ideas are good. And some of the writing is good. And that means that this person, this author needs improvement. So what I do every year is invite 2 or 3 authors to write a story together. Why? Because I see the potential. I see that there is a potential in how these people construct their story, in what they write about, and the ideas that they have. All they need is the ability to polish it and to create it in such a way that it becomes interesting for the readers to read at all. Because the way that it was originally constructed, or the way that they originally wrote the story, was off-putting for a number of readers. So they didn't want to read it. So if you help them improve that story or create another story together, where they can learn how to construct the story, construct the sentences in such a way that it becomes easier and more interesting for the reader to read, then that helps them. And along the way, I learned something as well. So
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, I mean, the sentence construction, active verbs versus passive verbs.
Yeah.
All of these things are something when you're trying to create, you can't be conscious of that.
Yeah, and during chat or actual conversation, you can talk about what you see in the story, how you see the story develop. You talk about plot points, you talk about everything that happens inside the story, and you explain to each other what you actually mean, what you intend to do. And sometimes the words just don't come out right. So you ask for help. That's easy. Asking for help is easy, but you have to do it. Just getting to ask the question, that's the hard part. Because many people do not want help. They do not want anything. They want
Well,
to.
I think they're having writer's block, and overcoming writer's block is what I taught writing at the college level for over, well, 28 years. And they just can't deal with it. Every word they put down, if anyone disturbs that word, it's very disturbing to them. They take it very as a slam, you know. So I had a whole series of exercises to do, how to overcome your writer's block, and I gave them extra credit for that. It was little fun exercises.
Yeah, and of course, it's not just the writer's block, it's accepting that whatever you write, you'll need to edit it anyway. I mean, you have a story, tell the story, show us what you want, show us how the story evolves in your head, and put it on paper, and allow other people to go over it and to say, hey, you can improve it by doing this. And this is something that the readers and helping writers should be doing. They should put a positive spin on it, because this is something that I found regularly in writing courses. Often the teachers are very negative. You did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did this wrong, this is not the way to do it. I'm like, don't tell me what I shouldn't do, tell me how I should do it better. And this is, you probably recognize this.
Oh, I do. Yeah, we were taught to do questioning rather than declarative sentences to the students, like, could you help your reader more, instead of, oh, your readers will hate this, you know.
Exactly.
Anyway, I think all of your advice is very well thought out and very should be very helpful. So I'm gonna, if we don't have any other questions, I'm gonna wrap it up, and we'll put it into the can, as they say in the film companies. So hope, just look for it tomorrow. And
Can I say one thing?
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I like what you were saying about collaborative writing, and I think that needs to be incorporated in the teaching, because working collaboratively is one of the ways that I see is critical to creating a future worth living, or a better future, depending on how you look at it. So I think collaborative writing across your differences and supporting each other is part of building a future. It's the praxis of a future.
Oh, Karen, I'm glad you said that. And I know a man who's on Facebook. He's a big theater guy here in town, and his little site on Facebook is called the Institute for Collaborative Storytelling.
Huh.
And look him up. Howard Allen is his name.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
yeah, you know, theater is much more collaborative in general than
Yes.
writing, but we can all move in that direction.
Well, we have to.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree with what you're saying. So with that positive note for the year 2023, let's forge ahead on, and we hope to have Mike Jansen back at some later time. He has much more material, I understand. So, Mike, are you
Yeah.
up for this, coming back?
Oh yeah, I like doing this stuff. So
Okay, well, hopefully there won't be any little glitches at my end, and we'll have a more regularized attendance. So thank you very much.
next time we have more experience, so that's good.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, every time.
Uh-huh.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thanks,
We're gonna
guys. That
end
was
it all
great.
now. Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Bye bye.